Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this session. It's with a great pleasure that we have you here today on this talk, on this first series of the Resilient YMCA Leaders Talk. For those of you in the Northern Hemisphere, we are in the springs. Nature is coming back gradually to life. For those who, like me, observe the Christian faith and tradition, this is the Holy Week. And for our friends Jews, this is the beginning of the Passover. This just to mention only a few of our tradition. We are all in the season that symbolizes renewal, hope, rebirth, and a renaissance. And most of all, a celebration of life, a victory of life over death and destruction. For the YMCA movement, this is an important moment in our collective journey, a journey toward a world of peace, equity, justice for all. And we are deeply humble and grateful that you could spare this time of your busy schedule. We are mindful for those who have to wake up very early or those who are staying very late to be part of this moment. We thank you. We are grateful. We are here to hold each other's hands and proclaim that together we will pull through. We will overcome. In this moment, more than ever, we believe in the collective ability of our YMCA movement to be resilient and resolute and witness of God's love for the humankind. Please join me in a short prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Now I'd like to introduce to you the president of the World YMCA, Madam Patricia Pelton. We will not say it enough. She made history to be the first female president of our worldwide movement. And we are all proud of what Patricia is doing. She's not just the president, she's a partner in providing leadership together with the executive committee. Patricia, we are so proud of you, and I'm pleased to hand over the space to you to take us through this first journey on the digital world. Welcome, Patricia.
Carlos will be back towards the end of this session to close out and to share a few announcements. My dear YMCA friends, it was wonderful to see you as you built up with your participation and to see some of your faces. It's just heartwarming. So I welcome each and every one of you, and thank you for joining us in this first session of the series entitled Resilient YMCAs Leaders Talks. We had over 250 participants that registered. I see that some are still coming on, and it's wonderful to have such a good turnout. And for your information, as noted in the slide, this session is being recorded. Very shortly, I will introduce our esteemed speakers, but I want to take a moment to say a few words. To all of those who've been victims of the COVID-19 virus, to those who are mourning the loss of these friends and loved ones, we extend our deepest sympathy and prayers. We are so sorry to hear of the loss of Miss Janice Rodman, or Miss Janice, as she was known at the Brooklyn YMCA, and we extend our deepest sympathy to her daughter, Jasmine, and her YMCA family. To all that are impacted by COVID-19 in YMCA, that includes all of us, thank you for all that you do. Every day I read about new interventions and programs that YMCAs are offering, whether online or through skeletal staffing, and I am so impressed and grateful. This pandemic has thrown a significant wrench into YMCA plans around the world. Vulnerable young people are taking on a large share of the load, and unemployment is expected to continue to rise. Our YMCA connectivity is a lifeline for many of those young people. Michelle Dean said, "Crisis forces commonality of purpose on one another." By participating in this Leaders Talk, we are doing just that, not out of force, but out of our global goal of radical collaboration and cooperation. To all of the volunteer leaders online, a special welcome and strength to you as you govern in this unprecedented time. To the operational leaders, your courage, creativity, and ability to make hard choices is recognized and appreciated. To those that are on the front line assisting community, you are all heroes. Thank you. And please continue to practice COVID-19 precautions. So on this day before Good Friday, at a time of deep faith, renewal, and reflection, let's walk together in the YMCA way of standing together for a better tomorrow. Now allow me to introduce and thank in advance our wonderful speakers. We have Denise Hatton, Chief Executive, YMCA England and Wales. Kevin Washington, President and CEO, YUSA. Dae-Yoon Yang, Manager, International Programs, National Council, YMCAs of Korea. Reverend Sipho Sokela, National General Secretary, South African YMCA. Antonio Marino, General Secretary, Latin America and Caribbean Alliance of YMCAs. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us today. So what can we expect from the session? Our 5 speakers have been asked to provide an 8 to 10 minute national or area update of the impact of COVID-19 with the response to date. We will hold questions until the end. We'll remind speakers not to talk too fast, as there will be simultaneous translation with subtitles. Thank you to Renata Ferrari from YUSA. I can see you there working already, Renata. Thank you. Without further ado, let's ask Denise Hatton, YMCA England and Wales, to begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. It's really great to be here with the global family. And so we're going to give an update in relation to the national perspective, but in particular, our response to that and how our YMCAs are faring on the ground. So we're going to take you through perhaps giving you a little bit of an understanding of who we are as a YMCA, so in particular our size, so our services and our finances. Then a little bit around our government's response, which has really been the lifeline to our movement, a bit about our national response, and then what we see emerging from this in relation to our movement going forward. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, if you can bear with me a moment. So YMCAs in England and Wales are probably around 114 local associations. Their income over the period of a year is about 220 million. So that gives you some context on size. Around 80 million of that income is income from our supported housing. So much of our housing is around supporting those that are most vulnerable in our communities, and that has remained really steady. And in fact, our YMCAs have been providing more housing for, in particular, people who were sleeping rough during this time. The rest of the work that we do generally is closed. So £140 million of our income usually came from things like our gym and health and wellbeing programs, our childcare and youth work, and the significant majority of this is closed. We have the odd ad hoc bits of online innovation in relation to youth work, and some of our nurseries that are more state funded, so not our private nurseries, are remaining open to support key workers. Although what we've found is actually the take up is not very significant in relation to those projects, but they do have some income coming in. But significantly, £140 million of our income was wiped off overnight once we had lockdown 3 weeks ago. Of that 140 million, 84 million of it is our staffing costs. Now, the lifeline for us, and probably what will keep our movement going in the future, is that the government has provided a scheme that will pay 80% of staff that we need to furlough. So that means staff that you do not make redundant or lay off, but that you set aside. They cannot work, but the government will pay them 80% of their salary so that they can come back to work as we emerge from this crisis. That means that actually we still have a gap of 16.8 million people that we need to pay those staff members, or they only receive 80% of that their salary. And that's been a real challenge for us, because most of those people, their salaries, the whole 100%, is what keeps their families going. Many of our YMCAs are continuing to pay that 20%, but some who are really challenged, that's really been difficult. In addition to that, you know, we've looked at what's the overall impact of our finances that's going to have the most significant impact on YMCAs in England and Wales. And we think that amounts to around 40 to 50 million pounds. So that's around £3 to £4 million a month in relation to lost income that we cannot find funding for at the moment to support. Even when we close down all of our buildings, so we've taken holidays where we can in relation to loans. So if we've got mortgages on new assets we've purchased, or we're not using utilities, but we still have standing order costs. So even after reducing everything and shutting buildings, there is still significant expenditure around some of those standing costs, insurance, for example. As a movement, we've been planning in 3 monthly blocks. So at the moment, we think the best we can see is 3 months in lockdown, potentially up to 6 months with a slow emergence after that. So that's the sort of planning that we've been taking. But equally, we have been looking at what the world might look like when we come through this. So much as I think, you know, our movement is being very solutions focused and feeling quite strong, we think the world will look very different as we emerge, which may not mean that we go back to being that £220 million turnover organisation. Government support has been a lifeline for us. So I have to say I would probably be having a very different presentation with you if the government hadn't stepped in to support businesses and charities during this time. So our government, in the significant support that's been given, is our job retention scheme. So that's that furloughing I mentioned. That's been a huge game changer for the YMCAs in England and Wales. So we have been very lucky in that I am not hearing of anyone so far that has been laid off, although I do think as we emerge, there is potential for that to look a bit different. The government's also had a number of grants that they've offered, business interruption schemes, business rates holidays, deferral of our taxes. to be paid. So some of these are great, but they are only deferred, so will still be a debt in the future and need to be taken into account. But some of the grants have helped, in particular, things like our retail operation that we have across England and Wales has had about 800,000 grants to support that, which means that that's really been very significant for the National Council, but hasn't really helped as much as we'd hoped it would, YMCAs on the ground. So it's a jigsaw puzzle of putting pieces together that support, and this government support, particularly in relation to staff salaries, has been significant. There's not been anything else significant in relation to supporting charities coming out from our government, apart from the fact that they have yesterday announced a £750 million package to support charities in England and Wales and Scotland and Ireland. The problem we have with that most of that is focused on the responses you are giving now, and so it may help us more housing, but generally we're not seeing that will support the work that £140 million of our programme that's been significantly affected. In the charity sector overall in England and Wales, we've already seen about 40% of charities closing, and we feel that there will be a significant number still. So the charity sector is saying we need a £4 billion package. The government responded with the furlough scheme, some grants, and 750 million. So we're expecting that picture to be much more significant. As a National Council, what we can do, we're feeling quite strong as a National Council. So we luckily had some reserves that meant that we weren't initially impacted, and the government schemes has helped us as an organisation. And so we've looked at what best we can do to support our YMCAs. We've put together an emergency response fund. So we looked at all of those little pots of money that you might have that you can reallocate. So we went to the Charity Commission about releasing some of those funds. So some we've already reached out to YMCAs with, some we're still waiting for decisions on. But we hope that to be in the region of 1.7 to 3.4 million. We've also said to YMCAs that they don't need to pay their affiliation fee for the next 3 months. If the lockdown goes on further than that, we will revisit that, and if we need to extend it, we will. But we are continuing to pay for our international functions. We think it's really important that at the moment we have the leadership that binds us, so we thought it was important we all continue to pay that. We've also set up a centralised hub. At these times, resource is really rare, so what we're doing is trying to help people not recreate the wheel, and to be able to make quick decisions. And sometimes you just need to be able to have a sounding voice in this time. Decision making is unprecedented in what you've got to decide on. So we've got WhatsApp groups, and we've got one central place for everything that comes out of government, other best practice from our sector, but also from YMCAs individually. The biggest thing that we've done is the advocacy piece. And we have people connected into government, what we call our parliamentary patrons, so government people that support our cause and support YMCA. So we have been very significantly engaging in relation to that. We have also been connecting into our national National Council for Voluntary Organisations, and they have been lobbying on behalf of the sector. But as I say, we have had support, but not nearly as much as is needed for the sector. The thing that we have been able to do with YMCAs is to make sure that their time is focused on those grants and anything coming out of government that will actually support them. So it's been really important that we have approached things as a collective, and we've seen a wonderful response from our YMCAs in wanting to do it together rather than lots of people trying to do it on their own. And emerging from this crisis, so the YMCA I would say in England and Wales is really resilient. I mean, I'm really proud to be part of what they're trying to still deliver. They're determined to emerge as a strong movement. And we may look a bit different, but they are looking at how they can save as much of the work as possible. And that is hard work. But equally, we've got key workers on the ground, such as in our housing, those supporting key workers in the NHS with childcare that are doing an absolutely phenomenal job. So although at the moment we're in survival mode, we do recognise that coming out of this, we've very quickly got to be thinking about what our business model looks like. So our statutory, so government income funded programmes have saved us as a movement. Our trading, which we thought was a really creative way of being able to do more as YMCA, as the bit that's been really significantly affected. So going forward, we'll need to give that some different thought. There's been a real rallying of volunteering in England and Wales, and that we need to galvanise that so it isn't lost once we emerge. But also for us, I think for YMCA, the wonderful thing that's going to come out of this is that actually we've seen in England and Wales a reigniting of people feeling part of community. So whereas previously we talked a lot about people being distant, people now want to come together. They're feeling that sense of community, and I think that's great for the fact that people are also really valuing every role in society. And so I think that really supports value. So I think that's going to be great for us going forward. But also some significant change about agile policy for our team. We're not sure we're going to go back to everyone travelling into central London every day, and what impact might that have on our business model for our YMCAs, because I don't think we'll be the only people saying that. So will childcare look the same? Very significant for us over here, and it's been delivered successfully, but it needs to look different going forward. And also the fact that we've got an economic impact. We're going to have a global recession. Will people come back and renew memberships? We're not sure. There's been some amazing stuff around physical activity online. I know we're using stuff in England and Wales that our YMCAs are producing, but also we've been using the YUSA's videos. Quite liking it. So will they come back, or will they want it in their homes? But also, I think that there will be a demand for the most vulnerable because of the recession. So I think going forward, much as we are determined, we're solutions focused as a federation, and we're as strong as we can be right now, we're going to need to look different. And if I leave you with the picture of our YMCA Federation, if it was a traffic light system, so that red ragging, 40% are in the red right now. We have strong potential we could lose them. 40% are very green, so we feel pretty sure they'll come through it. And 20% are that amber in the middle, where it could go either way. So, so significant change, but also a lot of strength.
Thanks so much, Denise. That was a thorough, robust, very thoughtful report. We have some questions that are linked to some of what you've covered, so that's really very helpful. Thanks, Denise. Okay, let's move on to Kevin, please. Kevin Washington, President and CEO, YUSA.
Can Denise stop sharing her screen so that, yeah, okay.
You hear me?
Thanks, Kevin. We can hear you and we can see you. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Patricia, and thanks to Carlos and the World Alliance team for the invitation to be with you today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to connect with my colleagues from around the world. If I was to pick one word to describe the impact of COVID-19, that word would be devastating. It's not only devastating for the United States, it's devastating for our world. You know, COVID-19 is a health crisis that has become a global economic crisis and has hit our YMCAs extremely hard. Now, I've been in the YMCA for 42 years, and I have never seen anything like this. As you know, for our operating model in the States, YMCA is different operating model in most national movements. And for that reason, so is our funding model. In addition to traditional philanthropic contributions and government grants, we count on the support we receive from our facility and program members. Membership revenue is a significant part of the financial engine that makes our organization work in communities. Without it, we wouldn't be able to empower our young people and help them reach their full potential, to improve individual and community health and well-being, and no sound. No sound. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, because I'm getting no sound on my thing. Okay. Without it, our work to empower young people and help them reach their full potential to help individual and communities grow and develop, and to meet the needs of the underserved and most vulnerable would not be possible. So our facilities closed, many of them closed in late March, and donations slowed drastically or stopping altogether. So most YMCAs have little or no revenue coming in. And our model, YUSA, is funded through dues paid by our YMCAs. So what we did immediately is YUSA waived the financial dues due to YUSA for the months of April and May. For our organization, YUSA, that was a decision that was worth about $13 to $15 million. But YUSA had to understand that YMCAs in US collectively will lose somewhere between $400 million in April alone from operating revenue. And if we continue on this path and go through the summer, we estimate losing summer camp would mean a loss of over $2.5 billion to the YMCA of the USA and the YMCA operations totally. That would be catastrophic. And it comes with very significant decisions that our leaders had to make. But of course, for us, we are a people organization. The most heartbreaking part of this is the decisions leaders had to make to furlough and lay off staff. More than 75% of YMCA staff have been furloughed or laid off. And some YMCAs have done up to 95% of their staff have been laid off. We know, as an organization that is connected to people, whose success is dependent on people, these are the toughest decisions we all have to make. And I sympathize with each of you as leaders having to make those decisions. But through all this, YMCAs have shown themselves to be vital community assets, providing emergency childcare. In the States, over 700 of our YMCAs are providing emergency childcare for first responders. Feeding the hungry. 600 of our YMCAs are ensuring that in their communities, they are a focal point for young people to get the meals that they would normally get in school. They're coming to YMCAs to get that. Providing opportunities for the American Red Cross to get blood, because we know there's a significant shortage of blood, and YMCAs are using their facilities to make that happen. And also caring for the isolated, seniors who are isolated, checking on them to ensure that they're not being forgotten about in these times. So that commitment to the vulnerable populations is still continued through the great work of our YMCAs in the communities in which they sit. And more importantly, the YMCA has led the advocacy efforts. Denise, what you talked about, we've been doing it as well, combining with the nonprofit sector in the US, resulting in opportunities for YMCAs to apply for government funding that could help sustain us during this point in time. I will tell you, we are continuing to advocate because at this point, we're advocating for a $60 billion set aside for charities across the United States to ensure they have the resources they need in order to stay viable. We know now, in this pandemic that's going on, those organizations are vital now. They're going to be even more vital as we get through this particular process. You know, I've never been prouder of this great organization. Through unimaginable circumstances, we have shown the resilience that has made the YMCA what it is today. That has seen us through wars, other pandemics, and great social and geopolitical turmoil. This resilience gives us all cause to be hopeful. We will get through this together as one global movement. This is a global crisis, and it demands a global response from the YMCA. And all of you have my commitment as the president of the YMCA of the USA that we stand ready to do our part. We will continue to mobilize financial and technical support to help the World YMCA area alliances and national movements preserve through this crisis and launch community recovery efforts. We will continue to support the World Alliance to develop its COVID-19 resource library, so YMCAs across the globe can have access to critical information, strategies, and best practices. And we will continue to emphasize partnering with young people and elevating their voices and providing support for them to convene and connect virtually and safely during this crisis so they can support each other's communities, mental well-being, advance their own solutions for promoting community, reintegration, and global competition. You know, we are always going to count on young people to lead us to a better future. After the crisis, their leadership will be even more important than ever we could imagine. And lastly, the U.S. movement will continue to count on your support. We know there's much we can learn from all of you about overcoming and then recovering from a pandemic. So I thank you in advance for all the wisdom and counsel you share with us. I have a great comfort in our history as an organization. So during this difficult period, and as we think about what we will have ahead of us, individually, collectively, going forward, I believe we can find confidence in our past. Let's consider the imperatives set forth in the Kampala principles: to work for equal opportunity and justice for all, to work for and maintain an environment in which relationships among people are characterized by love and understanding, to work for and maintain conditions within the YMCA and in society, its organizations and institutions, which allow for honesty, depth, and creativity, to develop and maintain leadership and program patterns which exemplify varieties and depth of the Christian experience, to work for and develop of the whole person. This is who we are. This is who we've always been, and this is who we will continue to be. So much has changed, and so much about us changed, at least temporarily, but we are still the YMCA. You know, one of the things I talked about to my team this year was, our slogan was transitioning to transformation. Transitioning to transformation. Well, I will tell you, this is the transformation that I expected us to lead, but we can lead it, and we shall. We are all in this together. We will get through it, and we will be even stronger as an organization. And I promise, as a YMCA CEO of YUSA, I'm your partner to ensure that we get through this together. Thank you very much.
Kevin, thank you very much. An incredible, robust talk from the heart, and yet sharing your business. Very good to be reminded of our foundational principles. I think if there was ever a time to do it, now it is. So thank you. And again, you've answered some questions in advance that I've received from the participants. So I really appreciate that. And thanks for your commitment to both you and Denise. It's incredibly important. All right, let's move on now, please, to Daeun from YMCAs of Korea. Korea has done a very interesting job of managing the COVID-19 crisis, and it will be interesting to hear how the YMCAs there are also working in sync. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello. Hello. Today I'm going to talk about how the virus affected Korea YMCA and how we are responding, and briefing on effects and response of YMCAs in Asia and Pacific. And lastly, I will talk about Korean government's response to coronavirus. Korean society and YMCAs in Korea also got affected by coronavirus like other countries. The number of unemployed people is increasing, and many industries are suffering economic damages. Korea YMCA is also experiencing that, especially YMCAs which have been operated mainly by programs such as sports and educational programs. Of the 67 YMCAs in Korea, 14 of them are in serious economic difficulties, and the rest of the YMCAs are also in a difficult situation. Still, we do not have any YMCAs closed and staff loss, especially layoff, because recently the general secretaries of YMCA Korea decided not to lay off any staff because of the virus. And to support this decision, the National Council of YMCAs of Korea is going to get a bank loan soon. Also, Korean government is partially supporting business and NGOs for employment retention. So many local YMCAs are applying for the subsidy. Korea YMCA thinks coronavirus is a social problem. So we are contacting with Korean civil society organizations, more than 1,000 organizations, to establish social principles to combat the coronavirus. The four main important principles we want to establish through this network are employment retention, strengthening of social safety nets, and stabilization of public systems, and most importantly, climate change response system. This is a picture of a recent press conference on this issue, and I will share the whole statement later. In Asia and Pacific, I will focus on the recent APA YMCAs meeting in which 13 countries participated. First of all, this table shows the number of diagnosis and deaths of coronavirus in Asia and Pacific. In most countries, a high level of social distance is being implemented, including lockdown, curfew, and ban of mass gathering. This has led to many people being unemployed, and more people are having trouble getting basic food right away. Many YMCA staff are working from home, and those YMCAs are suffering from the economic difficulties of not being able to run offline programs. These are situations checked by today. However, there are many YMCAs in responding to this difficult communities situation. Many local and national YMCAs in Asia and Pacific are providing information about the virus through online and offline campaigns and emergency humanitarian services, such as distribution of masks and food. Yeah, those programs are operated too. So lastly, I would like to introduce the Korean government's model of coronavirus response. The Korean government's response has features such as information sharing, public health system, medical expense support, quick and numerous diagnostic tests, and citizen participation campaigns. First, if there is the confirmed patient, the epidemiological investigation through credit card, CCTV analysis, location tracking through GPSs, those are identifies the travel route of the confirmed from 1 to 2 days before symptoms occurred to the day of confirmation. The identified route and age group and gender are open to all citizens, allowing citizens avoid the route and the facilities that are included in the route are in quarantine immediately. Second, there are more than 10,000 diagnoses per day and approximately 477,000 tests have been performed to date. Thirdly, coronavirus testing and treatment costs are 100% paid by government, so citizens are not afraid of getting the test. Fourth, through the public health system, many hospitals, beds, and medical staff are put into treatment of the infected nationwide. And they are all well equipped, which is very important to combat coronavirus. In addition, drive-through diagnosis, which takes 30 minutes per person, and walking through diagnosis, which takes 6 to 7 minutes per person, and home visiting screening services are conducted to reduce infections in hospitals. And hospitals are classified so that disease not related to coronavirus can be routinely managed. Lastly, nationwide and daily based campaigns have been conducted to make citizens personally manage their hygiene. So to end the presentation, I express my respect to many YMCAs that help their communities all over the world amid their own difficulties. And the Korea YMCA also will do our best to find various ways to respond to this crisis. I do believe that YMCA is the only global grassroots network in the world, and God calls us to respond with a sense of urgency to this global catastrophe, which makes the poor and vulnerable suffer more by left behind and uncared for. Also, I think it is our time to think about post-coronavirus global community, which can be more green, equal, and peaceful. Thank you for your listening.
Dae-yoon, thank you very much. It was very well presented. it's fascinating to hear how Korea has managed. And I think that all of our countries are paying attention to how well Korea has managed this situation. You know, just referring to the PPE, the personal protective equipment, that has been a huge issue in my country and I know in other countries. And so just great that your country was well prepared. And it sounds like your YMCA is being very thoughtful and planful and responsive. So thank you very much for that. Okay, and now next up we have Reverend Sipo from South Africa YMCAs. Thank you, Sipo, and let's get started.
We know many people were not able to log in. So I'm not sure Sipo is on. Maybe we might.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Carlos?
Oh, okay.
Sipo,
Yes.
thank you. We can hear you and see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Patricia and Carlos, for the great opportunity that has been given to share. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's quite a privilege to share with you on a subject that's so sensitive, and I'm really humbled to be amongst very esteemed colleagues and leaders. Let me start by saying to all of you friends all over the world, I wish on behalf of the South Africa YMCA and all the world to pledge solidarity and prayers to all of you, particularly those brothers and sisters who have been affected by the situation and COVID-19 virus. I've never seen so much commitment in the churches, YMCAs, or to pray for our brothers and sisters. So you are in our prayers. I've decided to present today in 3 levels. First of all, I just want to share the South African context, and I also want to stress that while representing South Africa, I thought I would give also an African perspective in some ways, although focusing on South Africa. Just want to talk about the political leadership response, which I think it's important for context. And I'm just going to speak about the emotional and the context of how Africans have been reacting to this situation of COVID, and then also talk about the work and the responses of the YMCA. First of all, I need to say right from the beginning that it is one of the rare cases that I can boldly say that our African leaders have acted so responsibly and decisive and have been coordinating their response to make sure that they take action to avoid what seems to a potential catastrophe in our modern history. They have clinically made sure that they restrict access between African countries to make sure that there's limited infection. They have boldly implemented monitored lockdowns and social distancing. In many ways, as I say, more than before, they've been uncompromising in enforcing this to ensure that the safety of people. In South Africa, I know experience where certain church leaders as well as Christians have been arrested for breaking the rules of lockdown. And yesterday, one of our ministers, well-known ministers, was suspended by the president, and we know that they are being, the minister is facing criminal charges. We also have been excited with the healthy collaboration between government, business, churches, and non-government in a way that has never before. And so we are so excited about this response. And the other thing I need to say is that governments have gone all the way to make sure that even within lockdown, there is access, there is economic shock absorbers for people, so that the elderly are having a rare, easy access to their social grants, as well as there is provision for poor people for food parcels and all that. And also also in our situation, we have they've created a fund, a solidarity fund from public as well as business, which is already now about 100 million USD dollars equivalent, just trying to make sure they cushion the impact of COVID-19 amongst our COVID. And we commend that to our public leaders. And I think in a way that has contributed to what we think is relatively low. I mean, it's not a good thing that people are dying, but it's a relatively low figures. Just to give you a picture, we have all over Africa, 11,300 infections to date. The dates are just over 500 in all of Africa. One of the highest countries is obviously South Africa with 185 infections. And yesterday, the total number registered was 15 deaths. Egypt and Algeria altogether, there are 1,500 infections. And our neighbor Mozambique has 1,300 infections. So, you know, while we're excited about, and we believe these are really low figures and we're excited about that, but one of the fears that we are beginning to see is that many people are saying what we are seeing now is just a calm before a big storm. And the fear that has gripped Africans is that they've beholden so with pain and fear how this virus has been aggressive in places that we felt have got much more resistance capacity, you know, in terms of health facilities. And the fear is no one knows how this virus is going to behave in Africa, in a place where we've got limited resources and capacity in terms of health systems and so on. But also one of the major concerns that we have is whether we have capacity to prevent the worst scenarios when, you know, our fragile economies will not be able to sustain the loss of income, to sustain the impact. And also there's a question of how much are we able to recover after COVID-19, and nobody knows even how long it's going to take. At the moment, the predictions are clear that we are not going to have in South Africa not less than 50% of unemployment, which is a sharp jump from 25% to 50%. Now, this is just an overview of how nations, political leaders have responded. Just giving you a picture of how our communities have responded. You know, obviously lockdown and social distancing has been well implemented, but the question that has become very clear is how do you apply lockdown in poor communities where there are people, 10 to 15 people staying in one small room, and how do you apply that lockdown? We have seen situations where people have been locked down for 3 hours in the morning, and during the day they are roaming around the streets, and when police catch them and say, why are you in the streets? And the question is, we are hungry, we're looking for food. And you know, it's also easy for affluent communities, and also a privilege, even not just talking about affluent communities, but middle class. It's easy to be able to afford the lockdown. You are able to go to the shops and stock foods and refrigerators. People are not able to do that. So it's just a simple situation. But one of the things that is becoming said is that lockdown has worsened one of the things that we have been suffering with in South Africa, which is domestic violence. You know, in a way, lockdown has encouraged family life, and we're grateful for how family life has changed. But, you know, domestic violence has been one of our social hazards, and we are beginning to hear from our monitors of domestic violence and gender-based violence that it's worsened, and they've already written letters to the Prime Minister, to the President, to ask that a special exemption be given to monitors to attend to the situation as well as provide counseling. So this has been a problem in our country, and so at this moment, it's very clear that one of the things that's going to be a focus of the YMCA is how to intervene in the issue of the culture of gender-based violence, which is aggressive and which would have worsened post-COVID-19. Just lastly, talking about South African response in this situation. Now, the lockdown has meant that 5 of our 7 YMCAs have had to totally close, which meant that they have had to close their revenue generating centers. And we're talking about, most YMCAs who, though they are generating a lot of money, they don't have reserves. That means they've had to let their staff go. Most cases, about 95% of staff gone, and who have no income and therefore have no livelihoods. It's been a lesson for our YMCAs about how we make sure we ensure that the sustainability that also have reserves, because at this moment we're desperate. The initial response of YMCA, local YMCAs have been that of self-pity, of closure of services and beginning to see a very gloomy future. But it has become very evident in our further consideration of the situation that organizations always redeem themselves in the time of crisis. The South Africa YMCA has therefore taken a deliberate decision that YMCA must get ready and take advantage of these opportunities and begin to face the situation. This has played out well in YMCAs that are already in good partnerships with their local community, because we've encouraged everyone to start having conversations, look in terms of how do we begin to position ourselves as players and an answer to this crisis. And so we have a few YMCAs who already are having partnerships with local government, business, and providing initiatives such as buildings and housing for homeless people. We have offered, some YMCAs have offered quarantine and isolation for those who have been diagnosed positively. Other YMCAs are already providing supporting services and enhancing awareness and accurate information to the poor, because there is a lot of massive misinformation that's been going around. At a national level, the COVID-19 as a crisis has forced us as a YMCA at national level to be very innovative. As a YMCA, we found ourselves spending more time than we have done before with our strategic partners. We've begun to work on meaningful collaboration with government, churches, ecumenical organizations, and other organizations. It may be for the first time, I think, that we've been able to partner meaningfully with the church. In the past has been with the government trying to forge partnerships with business, but this time we have forged partnership with the church, which is a major player, particularly in one of the provinces where it's very reasonable. And this has allowed us to increase our visibility and also position ourselves well as a great partner in the government. And so we have now started getting involved through that partnership in initiatives of raising awareness jointly with other organizations, promoting and building patriotism and solidarity within people. We've organized social prayers, which are more than prayers, are really beginning to organize community and to mobilize unity as we face the pandemic. But also we are now working on serious relief for vulnerable people in lockdown. We have jointly started working with a big ecumenical body here in the province, working with major churches, developing a major disaster response management activity, which is going to ensure high care and relief services as we anticipate the way out of COVID-19. We hope that the lockdown and everything and the social distancing will enable us to lower infections and get back to normal life. However, we are looking at the West. Now, lastly, I just want to say, this is our discussion that COVID-19 has forced us as a movement to go back to the mind of our founder, George Williams. We found a moment of crisis being a point that has led us to and forced us to innovation. It is in this time that we believe God generates in us an ability and what the Bible calls visions to respond in a moment of crisis. The YMCA was found in a moment of crisis. And it is happening at this time when we've been working on a strategic plan, and we are realizing that as everyone begin to say, how do we get back to normal life? We realize that we are no longer going to have normal life. The question is, how do we reinvent ourselves in the light of the current COVID crisis? And people are already beginning to talk about how, as a movement, we reposition ourselves. So the opportunity is exciting for us. The opportunity is positive in terms of how we are going to position ourselves as movements. I need to say that, as Kevin has said, you know, it's really enabled us as a movement to begin to find and see a resilience ability that we have never seen or imagined ourselves as a movement. So we're looking forward to the future as much as we said, as we go through all the deaths and the pain that our communities have experienced. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sipho. It was a great presentation, and thanks for giving us a picture of South Africa. You know, in all of these crises, we always see the vulnerable and the poor always being hit hardest, and that was a very bleak picture that you shared with us regarding people needing to be out of their lockdown situation, just get out in the street and look for some resources, some basic necessities of life. You gave us so much hope, though. I mean, it's wonderful to hear that the YMCAs are chipping in and going from a position of deficit to a position of what can we do, and to hear about your partners. And thank you for the hope that you've left us with, and solidarity and prayers. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, let us move on now to, last but definitely not least, Antonio Marino from Latin America Caribbean Alliance of YMCAs. Thanks, Antonio.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you and see your slides. Thank you.
Okay, give me 1 second. Oops. Something is not working here.
And just a reminder from people on the chat line to speak more slowly, and also you actually could speak in Spanish very clearly for all of our Spanish speakers, but there are people that are struggling a bit, so try to slow it up. Thank you.
Will do. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, everyone. Thank you very much, Carlos and team, for giving us the opportunity to share how different YMCAs are approaching this situation. I'm going to be focusing on how YMCAs in Latin America and the Caribbean are responding to the emergency, and also how we are reflecting and preparing for the future. In our case, for the most part, we are still at the very beginning of the cure, yet some health services are already collapsing. Some of you have already seen some of the terrible images and footage coming out of places like Guayaquil in Ecuador, for instance. So in our case, we see that some governments are supporting critical sectors of their economy, including NGOs, while others are still in denial. So government support for YMCAs in Latin America and the Caribbean will be very different in each country. And we as a federation are helping YMCAs with their strategies, ideas, networking, communication, and other materials. So similar to what we already heard from my colleagues, we are trying to keep essential programs open for the most vulnerable communities, and the YMCA is providing critical care for vulnerable youth and their families. Some of our programs are still open, such as shelters for street children, immigrant services, prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, juvenile justice, among many others. But I would like to point out that as we close some of our facilities and offices, in fact, the YMCA has expanded from nearly 400 community centers throughout Latin America and the Caribbean to having a YMCA in every home where there is a YMCA staff or a YMCA volunteer, as we can see in these pictures. And I want to acknowledge all of them and thank them for the work they are doing to keeping our mission alive during this critical time. Because thanks to all of them, we continue to be on the move. There are so many services and initiatives going on throughout the region that I will not be able to mention every single one of them during this very short presentation. And please forgive me for that, especially my colleagues from the region. But I want to highlight that all of our actions and initiatives are aligned with the Global Humanitarian Response Plan of the United Nations Coordinated Appeal, which focuses on containing the spread of the virus, decreasing the deterioration of human assets and rights, and protecting, assisting, and advocating for the most vulnerable communities. So looking at that global initiative, we have also grouped some of our initiatives around these critical actions. So we are making significant efforts to support each other in the region and keeping people connected. And when it comes to the programmatic approach, we are centering around 3 priorities, which are food security, economic support, and community health. And let me share a few examples with you. In terms of food security, many YMCAs in Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Uruguay, Jamaica, and many other countries are distributing nutritional food to kids and youth and their families in low-income communities. That these are families that depend on free lunch programs or similar. For instance, the YMCA Peru's entrepreneurship program for transgender men and women is ensuring access to food and other basic services. Trans men and women have been traditionally excluded and underserved in Peru and many other countries throughout the region. And our program participants depend on their daily income to feed themselves or pay the rent. So the YMCA focuses on ensuring food security to avoid hunger during the lockdown. When it comes to economic support, YMCAs are also granting small stipends and solidarity loans to families at risk of hunger or eviction. One example I would like to share today is the existing program that supports victims of sexual exploitation and abuse in Bogota, Colombia. With the lockdown, program participants lost their income and were at high risk of hunger and eviction. So several families were ending up on the streets or public parks of Bogota City. So the YMCA rapidly began negotiating with the landlords and granting subsidies or small loans to help pay for the rentals, allowing people to return to their homes and avoiding more evictions. When it comes to community health, several YMCAs are also helping families manage isolation through various programs that support the physical, mental, and spiritual health of our program participants and the community at large. So YMCAs in Colombia are delivering psychological first aid online courses. YMCAs in Uruguay are fostering their domestic violence and abuse prevention programs. The YMCA of Salto in Uruguay is doing home visits and phone calls to senior citizens. The YMCA of Santiago in Chile is organizing camps at home for youth, or the YMCA in Iquique in the northern part of Chile is part of a pilot program at the municipal level to repurpose full-face snorkel mask as a PPE, personal protective equipment, for the healthcare workers. This YMCA is also this is a larger municipal effort that is trying to replicate the Korean model of tracking people who tested positive. So these are just a few examples of how YMCAs are delivering crucial services during this unique time. I also wanted to do a quick commercial, but to keep our members connected and support our advocacy and fundraising efforts, we are creating a series of podcasts that we believe are as impactful as high-resolution photos, videos, or TV spots. Given the existing restrictions, people cannot go out and take pictures or film videos. So these podcasts are becoming very appropriate for us because they can reach many people, and you can also record them from the comfort of your home. So we wanna, again, this is a commercial. I wanna invite you to follow us on Spotify and listen to the stories from the local YMCA leaders and heroes who are serving their communities. We are actually finalizing the translation of most of them into English. So you will be able to find them on our channel in Spotify, or you can also go to our website, lacaymca.org/podcast. I'm very confident that you will feel very proud of the work being done by many of our local Y leaders and colleagues in the field, as I am today. To finalize my presentation, and I know we will have an opportunity to spend more time on this later on during this panel conversation, but I wanted to give you a hint that YMCAs are also preparing to transition from emergency response to long-term recovery in areas such as education, economic inclusion, and health, where we see there is going to be a huge increase in demand for our services. We also, similar to what Denise, Kevin, and others said, we also understand that the YMCA will look very different, or we will have to look very different after this, and we are reflecting on it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to give you a quick overview of what is happening in the region, and I look forward to the conversation.
Antonio, thanks very much. Great presentation. And you are early in the curve. I hope that you stay early. I hope that you don't have to face what many of the countries are facing, but you are so prepared. And thank you for showing us a lot of the on-the-ground work. And I'll definitely be visiting that site as well. That's Spotify. Excellent. So if we could, we'd give you all a virtual applause. So thank you very much for your great presentations. They're very much appreciated. Now, before we go to questions, we're going to have a short inspirational video. This was put together by Nathan Godinez, who's doing a placement at World YMCA. So I'll turn it over to the World staff to put that video on screen. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you to Nathan. That was incredibly good. We will now turn to the questions. So we have a couple of ways to ask questions. You can either try to do it through chatting, through asking a question through chat, and I'll check those. Or you can raise your virtual hand. You may want to ask your question directly through email, which we have had some very good questions. So I know we're not going to have a lot of time. I wish we had another hour to hear from our great panelists. I'm going to just kick it off by asking a question. This came from Numpulalo in South Africa. And Denise, I will direct this towards you. I would ask that we direct our questions to one individual, otherwise it's difficult, especially virtually, to direct to panelists. So this is the question. A recurring theme amid the coronavirus outbreak is that life after will not be the same as life before. Many of you have addressed that. Put differently, it's not going to be business as usual post-coronavirus. It's also recognized that there is an array of great positives coming out of this Kairos moment. Question: how does the World YMCA foresee the future of youth empowerment? How is COVID-19 influencing, impacting, shaping, and changing the vision and mission of the World YMCA? So her question is really related to its impact on youth and youth empowerment. Denise, please.
Thank you, Patricia. I think from my perspective, looking at the impact that COVID-19 has had on young people, their worlds really have stopped. So many people's education has stopped at a critical time. Young people have stopped being able to engage with others. So I've come out of this with a lot of energy. But equally, a lot of need themselves in relation to their mental health. So what I would say is the YMCA absolutely probably needs to be thinking about a virtual platform for youth voice. I think globally, we need to hear young people tell us what they think the impact is on them, and we could start to do that now. And from that, then ask them what they think the solutions are. I think one of the things I would ensure that we don't do is think that we have got, as the leaders, have got to find the solutions. I think that more now than ever, we need to enable young people to raise their voice around what they think those solutions are. So I think we've got a group of young people that are going to come out of this experiencing something that even most of us have never experienced before. So it's really important that we start talking to them now.
Thanks very much, Denise. A corollary to that question, again from questions received, and I'll turn this one over to Sipo. In terms of mental health and employment with youth, you gave the statistic that we may move from 25 to 50% unemployment in South Africa. Can you speak to how the YMCA might be able to help address the mental health issues that come along with that in South Africa? Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Obviously, I'm just going to speak rather than saying how we could do it. I'm just going to speak about what we have already started to do. We have begun to partner with, the university to create an environment where young people could come and find help from the YMCA in a holistic YMCA way. We are lucky that one of our volunteers is a professor of psychiatry, and so was able to help us through this process. Our understanding is that most people, when they approach the issue of mental health, is either providing places for young people who are struggling with drugs for rehabilitation and so on. But, we, in our model as a South African YMCA, one of the things we are good is creating a space for development and young people finding themselves and finding their abilities. So rather than trying to focus or creating a space for young people to deal with mental health, what we do is create an inspiring space where young people can find themselves and are exposed to opportunities of growth And the issues like psychiatric support are one of the issues, are not the main focus. So a holistic environment, an environment is created where young people, first of all, are not ostracized because of either being involved in drug situations, but at the same time, they are placed in an environment where it's inspiring and where they can find opportunities and access of support to self-development. And so this is how we, although we are in the early stages of that, but we feel this is how we can develop and play a role, but also acknowledging that as partners rather than just doing it on our own. And we have received a lot of potential support from other potential partners.
Thanks so much, Sipho. Now I'm looking for any hands that are raised. This is another good question from Eric. I'm just going to go ahead, but please feel free to raise your hand. This is from Eric Wong in Hong Kong. Looking ahead, when the infected cases of COVID-19 eventually subside, I'll direct this one to Kevin, if you don't mind. It is most likely, Kevin, that international travel and exchange initiatives would be greatly affected for various reasons, such as the economic downturn, and people are still on high alert for cross-infection and even contracting the virus. The question is, how can YMCA, as an international movement, continue to promote and carry out international services? Go ahead, Kevin.
I think the virtual stuff is going to be an important aspect, as we've learned today. I was interested, I think Denise said it, that she's been using some of the things that YUSA has put out. And we've seen that stuff has been hit all across the world. So I think virtual is key. I'm wondering, and I've been thinking about this, is what role can the YMCA play in the testing aspect of that? You know, because they got this quick test that's coming out now. So can we play a role in that process to help society move forward? Because there is a fear that this virus will continue if we haven't gotten rapid testing done in our society. I'm an old guy, and I was talking about this earlier today, that when polio was out, I can remember going to my school 4 weeks in a row to take the sugar cube to cure polio. Now the question becomes, how can the YMCA be engaged in that work to create safe environments to ensure that our communities feel better about traveling? But I do think it's going to take a while for consumer behavior to change, and our ability to work virtually is going to be an important aspect for folks as well. So I think it's not just virtual. I think it's a combination of both that we have to be concerned about, because consumer behavior is going to take a while to change, because there's quite a bit of fear associated with this virus. And the other thing that I will say, and this is just a personal part of this, since I have an opportunity to, what it has done, particularly in the US, and I'm sure this is consistent around the world, is highlighted the significant inequities that exist in our society. I can tell you in the United States, people of color are dying from this disease at more 5 to 7 times the rate that others are. So it really highlights the inequity in our country and in our world. So an opportunity for the YMCA is, how do we address that to ensure that it's highlighted now, so how do we act upon it? That's just a editorialize of what I'd like to talk about. So I'll leave it at that, Pam. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Couldn't agree more. Dayoon, I'll ask you this question, please. In terms of South Korea, how do you see releasing funds? So Mike Bromfield has asked this question. Many YMCAs around the world are using emergency funds or seeking constitutional legal changes to release funds. Is there anything that YMCA Korea is doing to support the emergency need in South Korea from investment portfolios, foundations, restricted funds, etc.? Dayoon, can you comment on that?
Negotiating.
We can't. So actually, National Council of YMCAs Korea, we are trying to negotiate with KOICA, one of the international international government organization, to get fund from the government to support other countries, especially through YMCAs in other countries. So I observed a lot of good activities in many YMCAs, and it would be a good chance to enhance those movements in this difficult situation. And also, we are, as Korea YMCA proposed 4 principles, I think it is good opportunity to build civil society network and solidarity based on the principle to combat coronavirus.
Thank you, Daeun. Excellent. And not seeing any hands, any chat questions. We have another good question here from YMCA Senegal, from John. Thank you very much. What strategy is needed, and this will go to you, Antonio. What strategy is needed not only to deal with such a situation as this economic downturn and health crises, but also to revive the economic machine with a much more entrepreneurial orientation?
Thank you, Patricia. I think it is very important, and as we look into the future, and knowing, I think there is a report either from the UN or ILO that came out recently where they estimated that I think there is going to be about 24 million people who are going to be impacted in their jobs or income as a result of this situation globally. So the YMCA should and must play a critical role in economic inclusion and making sure people are able to go back to their formal economy. Because one of the concerns, for instance, we have in Latin America, and probably is not different than Africa, is that we already have a very large existing informal economy. So how do we, as a YMCA, play a key role in making sure that people can insert into the labor market, the formal economy, but also more and more people will need new skills to become entrepreneurs, because the world is not going to be different, and probably with the transition we are doing to digitalization as a result of this lockdown, companies might be tempted to reduce their workforce. So how do we prepare and train people? So those are the questions we are thinking, and we certainly need to look at a very comprehensive strategy where we partner with governments and corporations and develop local and national strategies, because we will see a huge shift. So it's hard to predict how, but I believe that beginning conversations now with corporations and also especially our partners and sponsors, but also with our local and national officials will be critical.
Thanks very much, Antonio. And our last question, I think we're going to have to cut it off here. And sorry, Elaine, I see that you just asked your question. We'll see how quickly this goes. Mike Bromfield, can you identify yourself and who you're directing your question to? Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. I think as a youth organization, digital strategies, use of technology and social media has been very high on our agenda for quite some time, but it's not been an area that I think we've particularly thrived in. Not everywhere, but in some cases, there have been some initiatives that have been unsuccessful at quite significant cost. Now our hand is being forced, and we're having to think about the long-term future of digital initiatives. How do we take this moment to think about it seriously, and so it's done successfully. I'd like to direct that comment to Kevin or Denise, whoever feels they want to take it. Thank you.
Well, I'll start, and Denise, please feel free. We understand in the U.S. that is the next platform that we have to be very efficient at. I don't think it's an either or. There's always been this conversation about, because we are very, very facility based in the United States, but what we've learned through this epidemic is that the virtual presence has a very effective way to connect people to us. And I think it's a way that we will open up for our younger folks as well. So while we're going through this and we're thinking about recovery, we're starting to make some shift in how we're going to invest in the virtual processes of our organization. In fact, of the overall movement. We had a group of folks, about 6 or 7 of our larger YMCAs have come together to create this innovation process. And they're working to get additional resources to support that outside of YMCA to help us in this space. 2, we've done some partnerships early on with Apple around the Apple Watch and what that can do for us down the line. Very short, and we just started this process. And the other part of it is that one of our YMCAs, I think you may have seen it, developed YMCA 360. And we're going to use that as a platform to really, really invest time, effort, and resources, and find a partner this is their main deal. What we've tried to do so often is we have not made the major investment and partner with someone who can lead us down this path. So we're saying that we want our digital space to be, and I'll just use this term, Nike-like. We want it to be at a level that has a level of excellence and a level of engagement. What we also know is it's beyond what we've learned in this short time. It's beyond the health and wellness stuff. There's family program, there's educational program. That particular platform can be a significant delivery and support our mission of youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. So we see virtual and the platform to invest in that is a key part of our recovery process. And that's where we're headed in that regard. Hope that helps you to answer it.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Denise, anything to add before we wrap up?
No, I absolutely echo everything Kevin has said, but all I would say is sometimes where we have invested, I'll see people invest very significantly. I think it's critical for us to how we have been able to engage with people from digital platforms. If we're going to look at this globally, I think that would be amazing, but equally we must invite people in helping design that. So if we think, again, if we've got the answers, we might get it wrong. So to make that from the beginning, if we think this is a way forward, then let's ask young people what that should look like.
Good point.
Great. Thanks very much. Elaine, Douglas, and Cedric, I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get to your questions, but I'd invite you to send them on to myself or Carlos, and we can certainly forward those on to any of the panel members for comment if you would like a question. I hope that's all right with the panel members. I'm seeing some nodding, so that's good. So we're going to wrap this up now, and I just want to thank again all of the speakers very, very much, very, very helpful. And to the World YMCA staff who put this together behind the scenes, and of course to all of you for joining this Resilient YMCA Leaders talk session, very much appreciated. And just to close us out, I'll turn it over to Carlos. Thank you. Thank you,
Patricia. Thank you to you all the participants. Sorry to announce that we had a technical issue. Only 100 people were able to participate. We tried to solve it, but it was not possible. For those who were locked out, we are really sorry about that. But to tell you, from next week, we're going to continue the talk. We'll focus now in the next 4 series about how we prepare ourselves for the recovery. It's going to be different from every country, every continent. But how do we prepare ourselves for recovery? So this one is internal focus, but from next week, we'll bring external speaker from government, from academia, business sector, technology sector, to help us think through it. I would like to also announce on behalf of the Executive Committee that the World YMCA, together with the AIDA organization, will be providing to our retirees, the YMCA staff retirees who have not have a pension. We use this opportunity to give them some cash relief to go through this difficult time. And also in partnership with the Federation of the Retirees, there will be some resources for YMCA in countries where they don't have a medical cover, that those of the YMCA staff, the staff will be contracting the virus. Will provide some small help for them to get through this. And also we are will be working on a fund we are calling YMCA Solidarity Fund. That's going to be used for YMCA in difficult situation to help them go through this. This is about the national movement. So we'll be communicating that very soon. I would like to invite you to visit their website, the COVID Hub, because all the sharing, everything that is happening, we are capturing there. Please continue to share with us your information, what you are doing, your strategy, so that the movement can learn from each other. So please log into our website, ymca.int, and see about what is happening in the COVID Hub. So with your permission now, I want to close with a moment of reflection. First, to thank you again, but let's go back to the movement and do the work. And allow me to read this reflection or prayer for the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Norwich. It say, may we who are merely inconvenience remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factor remember those most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making their rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when the school closes remember those who have no option. May we who have to cancel our trips remember those who have no safe place to go. May we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic markets remember those who have no margin at all. May we who settle in for the quarantine at home remember those who have no home. As fear grips our countries, let us choose love. During this time, when we cannot physically wrap our arm around each other, let's yet find a way to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbors. Amen. And thank you very much, and see you next week.
Thank you, Carlos. Be safe all. Bye-bye.